Look at you, big, slow, and hiding behind cows like that makes you harmless. Sheriff Ketter's boot scraped the dirt inches from Elias Boone's hand as deputies laughed and closed ranks around him. Men like you always think land papers matter, he said loudly, savoring every word. This farm's done. You're done. Elias stood still, dust streaking his faded shirt, hands open and visible, breath slow and controlled. He clocked the missing body cam, the deputy blocking the driveway, the evidence that appeared where it hadn't been seconds earlier. To them, he was just a fat black farmer who wouldn't swing back. They had no idea they were cornering a man trained to endure humiliation, catalog threats, and decide exactly when to move. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Dawn crept over Elias Boone's farm like a hesitant visitor, the fog hanging low and thick between the fence posts. The heavy moisture made his work clothes stick to his skin as he moved through his morning routine. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, the same path he'd walked 1,000 mornings before. The goats crowded around him, their hooves making soft thuds against the worn boards of their pen. Elias reached down to scratch behind old Betty's ears, his large hands gentle despite their strength. "Easy now," he murmured, portioning out feed with practiced efficiency. "Everybody gets their share." A flash of movement caught his eye, a dark county SUV crawling past his gate. Elias kept feeding, his movements unchanged, but his eyes tracked the vehicle as it passed. 5 minutes later, it rolled by again, slower this time. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass, but Elias felt the weight of their stare. He waited until the SUV disappeared around the bend before setting down his feed bucket. Something wasn't right. The air felt different, charged with intention that made the hair on his neck stand up. Moving with purpose now, Elias began walking his property line, checking each fence post and marker. That's when he saw them. Fresh wooden stakes hammered into the ground, bright orange plastic ribbons fluttering in the morning breeze. They were at least 10 feet inside his property line. Elias knelt down, his knees creaking slightly, and ran his fingers over the splintered top of one stake. The wood was fresh, raw. This was done overnight. "Those weren't there yesterday evening," a voice called out. Across the road, Rena Dobbins stood on her porch, a steaming coffee mug in her weathered hands. Her eyes were sharp despite the early hour, concern evident in the tight line of her mouth. "No, ma'am, they weren't," Elias replied, pulling out his phone. He took careful photos of each stake, making sure to capture their position relative to his existing boundary markers. His hands remained steady as he documented everything: the angle of the stakes, the boot prints in the soft earth around them, even the way the ribbons pointed toward his barn. Rena watched him work, her presence a silent witness. She'd lived in the county long enough to know what fresh survey stakes usually meant, and it was never good news for small farmers like Elias. Inside his house, Elias sat at his kitchen table and dialed the county assessor's office. The phone rang 4 times before a bored voice answered. "County assessor's office. This is Elias Boone out on Route 7, he said, keeping his voice level. "I found survey stakes on my property that I didn't authorize. Need to know who placed them and why." A long pause followed, filled with the sound of clicking keyboards. "I don't see any scheduled surveys for that area, Mr. Boone." "These stakes are inside my property line," Elias pressed. "Someone came onto my land without permission." "We'll have to look into it," the voice replied, dismissive now. "Fill out a form on our website and someone will get back to you." "How long will that take?" "We'll look into it, sir." The line went dead. Elias set his phone down carefully, studying the way morning light played across its screen. The message was clear enough. Nobody was going to help him figure this out. He stood up, his chair scraping against the worn linoleum, and headed back outside. The fog was starting to lift, revealing fresh tire tracks he hadn't noticed earlier. They cut through the wet grass near his barn, the pattern familiar, the same tread as the county SUV that had passed by. Elias followed them, finding more boot prints leading toward his milk house. The marks were deliberate, purposeful. Someone had been doing more than just placing survey stakes. He didn't say anything to his animals as he finished his morning checks, but they seemed to sense his unease. The goats stayed closer than usual, and even the usually standoffish barn cat wound around his ankles. Elias moved through his routine with careful attention, noting every detail that seemed out of place. At the main gate, he double-checked the chain, making sure it was properly secured. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, charged and ready, filled with photos that might mean nothing or everything. The morning sun was starting to burn off the last wisps of fog when he heard it. Sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Elias stood his ground as the sound grew closer, the wail bouncing off the hills surrounding his farm. They were coming fast, heading straight for his driveway. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the peaceful morning like knives. Multiple vehicles, by the sound of it, bearing down on his property with urgent purpose. Elias's hands stayed loose at his sides, his breathing steady despite the approaching chaos. The animals had gone quiet, sensing the change in the air. The sound echoed off his barn, growing closer with each heartbeat. Elias thought about the fresh survey stakes, the mysterious SUV, the boot prints near his milk house, all pieces of a puzzle he was starting to understand too late. Gravel crunched under heavy tires as 3 patrol cars and a county truck swung into Elias's driveway. The vehicles fanned out in a practiced formation, blocking both his barn entrance and the main gate. The morning sun glinted off their windshields, harsh and bright against the peaceful farmland. Sheriff Wade Ketter stepped out first, adjusting his hat with theatrical slowness. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he surveyed Elias's property, like a man already counting what he could take. Deputy Lyle Griggs emerged next, practically bouncing on his feet, eager as a guard dog straining at its leash. 3 more deputies spread out behind them, hands resting casually on their belts. "Morning, Mr. Boone," Ketter called out, his voice carrying across the yard with practiced authority. "Got some matters we need to discuss." Elias stood his ground near the barn door, watching them approach. His goats had gone quiet in their pen, huddled together away from the commotion. Even the chickens had stopped their morning pecking, sensing the tension in the air. "Sheriff," Elias replied evenly, "what brings you out here?" Ketter held up a paper, waving it like a flag. "Emergency search authorization. Got some concerning reports about this property we need to look into." "What kind of reports?" Elias's voice remained calm, though his eyes caught every detail. The way Griggs kept shifting position to stay in his blind spot. How 2 deputies were conspicuously missing their body cams. "Anonymous tips," Ketter said, still smiling. "Stolen farm equipment, unlicensed sales, illegal livestock operations. You know how it is, concerned citizens doing their civic duty." Griggs stepped closer, invading Elias's personal space. His breath smelled of coffee and satisfaction. "Bet we find all kinds of interesting things, won't we, boy?" Elias didn't flinch at the deliberately inflammatory word. "I'd like to see that authorization," he said, addressing Ketter. "And I'll need all your badge numbers for my records." The smile dropped from Ketter's face. Griggs moved like he'd been waiting for permission, grabbing Elias's arm and spinning him around with unnecessary force. "On the ground!" Griggs barked, kicking at the back of Elias's knees. "Now!" Elias could have resisted. His muscles knew exactly how to counter the hold, but he let himself be driven down, his face pressed into the dirt near his own barn door. The ground was still damp from morning dew, soaking into his shirt. "There we go," Griggs laughed, grinding his knee into Elias's back. Not so big now, are you? Ketter's boots appeared in Elias's limited field of vision. We're just doing our job here, Mr. Boone, keeping the county safe. His voice projected outward, playing to an audience Elias couldn't see from his position. Can't have people thinking they're above the law. The other deputies fanned out across his property. Elias tracked their movements by sound, boots stomping through his vegetable garden, the crash of feed bins being knocked over, his animals bleating in distress as gates were rattled and doors slammed. "Check everything," Ketter called out. "These types always think they can hide things in plain sight." Elias focused on his breathing, keeping it steady and controlled. He mentally recorded every detail. Which deputies were filming, which weren't. The way Griggs's hand shook slightly with excitement as he maintained the hold. The specific pattern of mud on Ketter's boots, the same tread he'd seen earlier near his milk house. "Sir, this door's locked," a deputy called from the storage shed. "Well, unlock it," Ketter replied, as if it were obvious. The sound of metal breaking followed, his padlock being cut. Through it all, Elias remained still, his face pressed into his own soil. He heard his hens scattering in panic, smelled motor oil from the county truck, felt the vibration of heavy boots moving past him toward the milk house. "Nothing in the feed room," someone reported. "Moving to the tool area." Griggs leaned down, his mouth close to Elias's ear. "Awful quiet for an innocent man. Got nothing to say?" "My lawyer will do the talking," Elias replied softly, which earned him a harder press of the knee. A deputy emerged from the barn, holding up a set of bills. "Found these hidden behind some equipment. Lot of cash for a small-time farmer." "That's from the farmer's market," Elias said. "I have receipts." "Shut it!" Griggs snapped, jerking his arms higher. Through the gap under the barn door, Elias watched boots moving near his tool bench. A hand dropped something small and plastic. Deliberately, carefully. The same boots shifted, then stepped back. "Sheriff!" the deputy called out. "Got something here!" The boots moved again, this time with purpose. "Well, well," the deputy said, bending down to retrieve what he'd just planted. "Look what we found!" A small bag dangled from his fingers, his grin visible even from Elias's limited perspective. The deputy's face showed no shame, no hesitation, just the satisfied look of a man who'd done this before and expected to do it again. A cloud of dust rose from the road shoulder as a weathered blue sedan screeched to a halt. Tessa Velez burst out, her press badge swinging from her neck, phone already raised and recording. Her dark hair was coming loose from its braid as she jogged toward the farm entrance, narrating in a clear, steady voice. "I'm live at the Boone family farm, where what appears to be an unauthorized police raid is in progress," she announced, keeping her camera focused on the cluster of patrol cars. "Multiple deputies on scene, no warrant visible, and—" She zoomed in on Elias, still pinned to the ground. "What looks like excessive force being used on the property owner." Sheriff Ketter's head snapped up at her voice. His entire demeanor shifted like a switch had been flipped. The predatory stance softened into something more camera-friendly. He adjusted his belt, smoothed his uniform, and turned to face Tessa with a practiced smile. "Miss Velez," he called out, spreading his hands in a welcoming gesture. "Always a pleasure to have our local media taking an interest in law enforcement operations. Sheriff, can you explain why Mr. Boone is being held down when he appears to be cooperating?" Tessa kept her phone steady, documenting everything. "And could you show us the warrant for this search?" Griggs's knee remained firmly planted in Elias's back, but his aggressive expression had turned uncertain, eyes darting between Tessa's camera and Ketter for guidance. "Now, Miss Velez," Ketter's voice dripped with manufactured patience, "we're conducting a legitimate investigation based on multiple community complaints. We have proper authorization." "That's not the same as a warrant," Tessa interrupted, stepping closer. Her camera captured deputies emerging from the barn with armfuls of Elias's paperwork. Are those private documents being seized without a court order? More vehicles were stopping along the road now. Neighbors emerged, gathering in small clusters. Rena Dobbins stood at the front of the growing crowd, her arms crossed tight over her chest. The whispers grew louder. "What they doing to Elias? Ain't right. All these cops. Someone ought to call somebody." Ketter maintained his camera-ready smile, but his eyes had gone cold. "We're simply following procedure here, folks. Nothing to be concerned about." Elias noticed the change in pressure from Griggs's knee, slightly lighter now that witnesses were recording. He kept his breathing steady, watching and waiting. Tessa panned her camera across the scene, narrating each detail. Deputies are searching buildings without showing cause. Animals appear distressed. Mr. Boone's still being held down despite no visible resistance. I count at least 2 deputies without active body cams. Her live stream stuttered suddenly, the image freezing for several seconds before resuming with degraded quality. Tessa frowned at her phone, tapping the screen. "Having some technical difficulties," she reported, "but we're still—" The video froze again, longer this time. Ketter's friendly mask slipped a fraction. He stepped toward Tessa, positioning himself between her camera and the deputies searching the milk house. "Miss Velez, you're approaching an active law enforcement operation. Could be dangerous. Wouldn't want you to get hurt." The threat hung in the air, wrapped in a thin veneer of concern. Elias noticed movement by the county truck, a deputy adjusting something inside the cab. The low electronic hum grew more pronounced. "I'm well within my rights to record," Tessa insisted, but her voice betrayed frustration as her stream continued to glitch. "The public has a right to see." "Rights?" Griggs barked out a laugh, his knee driving hard into Elias's back again now that the video was unstable. "You're interfering with a police action, girl. That's a crime." The live stream's quality deteriorated further, breaking into pixelated chunks. Tessa backed up a few steps, trying to find better signal. "Something's wrong with the connection." "Must be these rural areas," Ketter said with exaggerated sympathy. "Poor coverage out here." But Elias had seen the pattern. Every time Tessa's stream stabilized, the hum from the truck would spike, and the video would fail seconds later. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The gathered crowd grew restless as the live stream continued to malfunction. Some raised their own phones, but their recordings seemed to suffer similar issues. Rena Dobbins stepped forward, her voice carrying across the yard. "We're all watching, Wade. All of us." Ketter's smile turned sharp. "Then you'll all see we're just doing our jobs." He nodded to Griggs. "Deputy, secure that phone. Can't have her endangering herself or our operation." Griggs released his hold on Elias and lunged for Tessa's phone. She tried to step back, clutching it tighter, but Griggs grabbed her wrist. "That's police evidence now," he sneered, twisting until her fingers opened. The phone clattered to the ground. Griggs snatched it up, holding it overhead like a trophy, while Tessa rubbed her wrist. The growing crowd on the road erupted in angry murmurs. "Just keeping everyone safe," Ketter announced loudly, still performing for his audience. But his eyes were cold and satisfied, as the last connection to the outside world went dark in Griggs's grip. The electronic hum from the truck continued its steady drone, and in the sudden silence of the killed live stream, the sound of deputies ransacking Elias's farm seemed to grow louder, more deliberate, more bold. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Rena Dobbins strode across Elias's yard, her sensible shoes kicking up dust with each determined step. A thick manila folder was clutched to her chest, like armor, her silver hair gleaming in the harsh light. The crowd at the road parted to let her through, their whispers following her movement. "Wade, Ketter!" Her voice cracked across the yard like summer lightning. I've got some interesting reading material here you might want to see." Ketter turned slowly, his practiced smile flickering as he recognized the former school secretary. Rena had spent 30 years keeping records for the county, and everyone knew she hadn't stopped just because she'd retired. "Mrs. Dobbins," he said, smoothing his voice into honey, "this is a police operation. You need to stay back with the others." "Police operation?" Rena snorted, flipping open her folder. "More like a land grab, just like the Johnston place last spring, and the Rodriguez farm before that." She pulled out a sheet covered in neat columns. Funny how it always starts the same way. Surprise inspections, mysterious complaints, evidence that appears out of nowhere. Griggs stepped forward, using his bulk to loom over the smaller woman. "Ma'am, you're interfering with—" "I'm reading public records, Deputy." Rena cut him off, not backing down an inch. She held up another paper. "Like these property transfers. Every seized farm sold at auction for pennies on the dollar. And look who keeps buying through shell companies, Cal Wren Development." She jabbed a finger at the survey stakes. "Same company that just filed new permits for this exact acreage." Elias watched the exchange carefully, noting how Ketter's jaw tightened at the mention of Cal Wren. The pieces were falling into place. The stakes, the raids, the planted evidence. This wasn't about drugs or stolen equipment. This was about his land. "Mrs. Dobbins," Ketter said, voice hardening, "you're working yourself up over nothing. We received credible reports." "Anonymous tips, just like always," Rena interrupted. "Right before the surveys show up. Right before the raids start." She pulled out more papers. "I've got dates, Wade, times, license plates of county vehicles driving past targeted properties, patterns of harassment that somehow never make it into official reports." Griggs moved closer, deliberately invading her space. His hand rested meaningfully on his belt. "That sounds like accusations against law enforcement, ma'am. Could be considered slander." Elias saw the threat in Griggs's stance. Without making sudden movements, he stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Rena's shoulder, guiding her back a step. His bulk naturally inserted itself between her and the deputy. "The records speak for themselves," Rena continued, though she allowed Elias to position her at a safer distance. "Public documents, all of them, including the new survey permits that somehow got approved before anyone notified the property owner." At the edge of the scene, Tessa was still arguing with the deputy holding her phone. "That's personal property containing evidence of police misconduct," she insisted. "You have no right to—" "One more word about rights," Griggs called over to her, "and you'll be riding to the station in cuffs. Obstruction's a serious charge, girl." "So is tampering with evidence," Tessa shot back, "like that signal jammer in the county truck." Ketter's friendly mask dropped completely. "Deputy Griggs, secure that phone as evidence. Miss Velez can file a formal request to retrieve any personal items not related to our investigation." He turned back to address the growing crowd, raising his voice to Carrie. "Folks, we've discovered illegal substances on the premises." He held up the planted baggie of pills. "Given the severity of these findings, we're implementing emergency protocols. County Animal Control will be taking temporary custody of all livestock for their safety and the public good." Elias felt his chest tighten. The animals were his livelihood. His goats, his chickens, the cattle he'd bred carefully over years. Taking them would cripple the farm, guilty verdict or not. "You can't just—" Tessa started to protest. "We can, and we will," Ketter interrupted. "We have probable cause of criminal activity. That gives us broad authority to secure the property, and any assets that could be related to illegal operations." The crowd shifted uneasily. A few people drifted back toward their cars, not wanting to be associated with trouble. Others looked away when Elias glanced in their direction. The message was clear. They might disapprove, but they wouldn't stick their necks out. Rena clutched her folder tighter. "This is robbery with a badge, Wade, and you know it." "This," Ketter replied, pulling a fresh paper from his pocket, "is a notice of criminal charges." He slapped it against Elias's chest with unnecessary force. "Possession of controlled substances, resisting inspection, interfering with law enforcement. County officers will be stationed here starting tonight to secure the premises and prevent evidence tampering." Elias took the paper without changing expression, though inside his mind was racing. They weren't just trying to arrest him or seize his animals. They were setting up to take everything while he was tied up in court, unable to fight back. The raid wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The sun hung low and angry on the horizon as the last patrol car pulled away from Elias's farm, leaving behind upturned feed bins, scattered papers, and frightened animals. The dust from their departure hadn't even settled before Elias began a careful sweep of his property, photographing every bit of damage with mechanical precision. His movements were controlled, but his eyes missed nothing. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Rena Dobbins settled at the worn wooden table, spreading her documents across its surface like battle plans. Tessa paced nearby, scribbling furiously in a spiral notebook she'd borrowed after they'd taken her phone. "Write down everything you saw," Rena instructed, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "Times, faces, exact words if you can remember them. Especially that deputy who planted the evidence." Tessa's pen flew across the page. "The way Griggs moved, he knew exactly where to put that bag. Like they'd planned it." "They did plan it," Rena said, sorting through her papers. "Just like they planned the timing of those survey stakes." She checked her watch and wrote the time next to a fresh entry. 3 raids in 6 months, all following the same pattern. Elias entered through the screen door, his boots carefully wiped clean. Without speaking, he filled his ancient coffee maker and set it brewing. The familiar scent filled the kitchen, pushing back against the lingering worry that hung in the air. "How bad?" Rena asked, watching him. "Feed scattered. Storage bins knocked over. Animals spooked, but not hurt." His voice remained level, factual. "They broke the east barn latch. Made it look accidental." Tessa looked up from her notes. "They'll say you did it yourself. Try to claim you're destroying evidence or something." Elias nodded once. "Already photographed it. Time-stamped." He moved to his mailbox by the door, sorting through the day's delivery with careful hands. Near the bottom of the stack, a heavy cream-colored envelope bore a federal seal. His expression didn't change as he opened it, but his shoulders tensed slightly as he read. The letter was brief, official. It connected his name to an operation from his past, one that was supposed to stay buried in classified files. The message wasn't a threat, exactly, but the implications were clear. His history could become a weapon against him if the wrong people started digging. "They'll try to make me the villain," he said finally, folding the letter with precise creases. He didn't elaborate further, but the weight of unspoken words filled the kitchen. Outside, the day's heat began to fade. Long shadows stretched across the yard as Elias checked each animal pen, counting heads, ensuring water troughs were full. His movements were unhurried but purposeful, a man preparing for a siege. Rena organized her documents into clear plastic sleeves, each page protected and numbered. "We need copies," she said. "Multiple sets, different locations. They'll try to discredit everything we have. And we need eyes on the property," Tessa added, flipping to a fresh page in her notebook. "They took my phone, but I can borrow equipment, set up cameras." The sweep of headlights across the kitchen window cut her off. A patrol car crawled past the property line, moving slower than necessary. Its tires crunched on gravel as it paused at the gate. Elias watched through the window, his bulk casting a shadow across the floor. "They won't wait long," he said quietly. "Pressure starts now." Moving with deliberate calm, he gathered his tools and headed to the broken barn latch. The patrol car idled at the gate, its presence heavy in the growing darkness. Elias worked steadily, replacing the damaged hardware while keeping the car in his peripheral vision. Behind him, his most vulnerable animals shifted nervously in their pens. "Let me help," Tessa said, appearing at his side with a flashlight. She positioned herself to illuminate his work, while keeping her own face in shadow from the road. Together, they moved the goats and younger animals into the most secure enclosure, the one with clear sight lines and multiple exit points. Elias checked each gate twice, his hands gentle on the metal latches. The patrol car finally pulled away, but minutes later, another set of headlights swept the property. This one moved even slower, lingering at each building before moving on. Night settled fully across the farm. Stars emerged above the pasture, but their light was diminished by the harsh beam of a spotlight that suddenly locked onto the barn's main door. The artificial glare held steady, creating sharp shadows and washing out the natural evening darkness. Inside the barn, Elias stood motionless in the shadows beside his goats. One of the younger ones pressed against his leg, seeking comfort. He placed a steadying hand on its back, his fingers finding the familiar curl of its wool. The spotlight remained fixed, a silent reminder that they were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. Through the barn's side window, he could see Rena's porch light still burning, her silhouette moving behind curtains as she continued documenting everything. In the farmhouse, Tessa's borrowed flashlight bobbed as she photographed the property line with a disposable camera. Small acts of resistance, building evidence piece by piece. The spotlight held its position, unwavering, turning the barn door into a bright stage where every movement would be observed and judged. Elias remained in the shadows, one hand still resting on his goat, measuring his breaths like he'd been trained to do in another life, long ago. The kitchen clock ticked past 9 as Elias sat at his scarred wooden table, a lined notebook open before him. His handwriting was precise, almost mechanical, as he documented every detail of the day's raid. Timestamps, badge numbers, the exact words Ketter and Griggs had used. Through the window, he could see the dark shape of a patrol car, engine running but lights off, a predator waiting in the shadows. His farm receipts lay in neat stacks beside him. Years of careful record-keeping that proved every animal and piece of equipment was legally his. The deputies hadn't even glanced at them during the raid. They hadn't wanted proof of innocence. Elias reached for Rena's borrowed landline phone, dialing the county sheriff's office with steady fingers. The line rang 6 times before kicking to voicemail. He spoke clearly, professionally. "This is Elias Boone. I'm requesting copies of today's search authorization and all body cam footage from the officers present during the raid on my property." He left his number, knowing they already had it. Next, he called Martin and Associates, a local law firm. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "I need to speak with an attorney about a civil rights violation," Elias said. "Oh." The pause was heavy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Boone, but we have existing contracts with the county. It would be a conflict of interest." Her voice dropped. "Try someone out of district." 3 more law firms gave similar responses. Each rejection was polite, professional, and absolute. In Rena's kitchen next door, Tessa cradled the landline phone between ear and shoulder while scribbling notes. "Yes, I understand it's a small-town story," she said to the regional news desk, frustration edging her voice. "But we have documentation of systematic—" She stopped, listening. "No, I don't have video right now. They confiscated my phone, but—" Another pause. "Hello?" The line had gone dead. Outside, gravel crunched under heavy tires. 2 deputies had returned, their patrol car creeping along the fence line. The spotlight stayed off, but their presence was deliberate. a reminder that darkness wouldn't protect him. Metal rattled as they shook his gate chain, followed by muffled laughter. They were trying to provoke him, hoping he'd storm out angry and give them an excuse. Elias remained at his table, keeping his hands visible through the window. The cheap digital camera Rena had lent him sat ready beside his notebook. It wasn't high quality, but it could capture timestamps and license plates, evidence that couldn't be erased as easily as a phone. He documented each patrol car pass, each rattle of the gate, each moment they lingered too long near his animals. The notebook pages filled with times, descriptions, vehicle numbers. His writing never changed pace or pressure, no matter what happened outside. At 11:15, headlights swept across his yard again. This time it was a county maintenance truck, moving slow past the milk house. Elias watched from the darkened kitchen, his body still, letting them think he'd finally gone to sleep. The truck's license plate was partly obscured by mud, but he photographed it anyway, along with the time display on his kitchen clock. The truck idled for 3 minutes near his equipment shed before moving on. Elias wrote down the exact duration in his notebook, adding it to the growing pattern of intimidation. Midnight came and went. The patrol cars had settled into a rhythm, passing every 45 minutes, like clockwork. Each time, Elias documented their presence without confronting them. Let them waste fuel. Let them think he was wearing down. He used the quiet moments between patrols to check his animals. The goats huddled together in their secure pen, eyes gleaming in his flashlight beam. He counted heads, making sure none had been spooked into hurting themselves. Their soft bleats of recognition helped steady his breathing. Near 1 in the morning, he was adding fresh water to the troughs when he heard it. A soft metallic sound from the barn's side door. It was subtle, almost lost under the night insects, but his trained ears caught the distinct click of metal on metal. Someone testing the lock. Elias stood motionless in the darkness, his body relaxed, but alert. The sound didn't repeat. There was no scrape of forced entry, no footsteps walking away. Just silence, heavy with purpose. He kept his flashlight off, letting his eyes adjust fully to the dark. The patrol car was gone from the road, but that meant nothing. They'd shown all day how they operated, always in pairs or groups, one visible while others moved unseen. The barn's main door remained secure, its new lock gleaming dully in the starlight. But the side entrance had older hardware, more vulnerable points. The click had come from there, deliberate enough to be heard, like a message. We can reach your animals anytime. Elias stayed still, controlling his breathing the way he'd learned years ago when much more lethal threats had tested his patience. His fingers curled slowly around the camera, ready to document whatever came next. Morning sunlight streamed through the feed store's dusty windows as Elias pushed his cart down the familiar aisles. The wooden floors creaked beneath his work boots, and the air smelled of sweet grain and leather. He'd made this same supply run hundreds of times, but today felt different. Eyes followed him with new wariness. Mrs. Henderson, who usually chatted about her chickens, suddenly needed something from the back room when he approached. Tom Wilson, whose farm bordered his to the north, became intensely interested in comparing feed prices on a shelf. The message was clear. Association had become dangerous. Elias kept his movements slow and deliberate as he loaded his cart with necessities. Grain for the goats, mineral blocks, basic medical supplies. He'd just picked up a heavy bag of feed when he heard the bell above the door jingle. Deputy Griggs swaggered in wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-built muscles. His badge wasn't visible, but his gun rode prominent on his hip. His eyes locked onto Elias immediately, lips curling into a predator's smile. "Well, look who it is!" Griggs called out. voice pitched to carry. The big man himself. He walked with exaggerated casualness toward Elias's aisle, positioning himself to block the path. Surprised you're still buying supplies? Seems like a waste of money, considering. Elias kept his face neutral, focused on reading the feed ingredients list he already knew by heart. The other customers in the store shifted uncomfortably, finding reasons to drift toward the exits. You know what I can't figure out? Griggs stepped closer, invading Elias's space. How folks like you think you can just set up shop wherever you want. This ain't exactly your kind of place, is it? The paper feed bag crinkled slightly in Elias's grip, but his voice stayed level. Excuse me, Deputy. I need to get by. Oh, now it's Deputy. Griggs's voice dripped mock politeness. Real respectful. You should be grateful we let you stay out here at all. He rocked forward, shoulder connecting hard with Elias's arm. The heavy bag of feed slipped, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Grain spilled across worn floorboards, creating a small golden pool at their feet. The few remaining customers suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Old Mr. Peters, who'd bought hay from Elias for 3 seasons, turned his back completely and became absorbed in examining garden tools. The store owner, visible through his office window, quickly picked up his phone and began an animated conversation with no one. Elias knelt slowly, his knees protesting against the hard floor. One handful at a time, he began gathering the spilled grain into a neat pile. Each movement was measured, unhurried, though his jaw muscles tightened almost imperceptibly. Griggs loomed over him, boots inches from Elias's fingers. Look at you, right where you belong, down there cleaning up your mess. He chuckled, shifting his weight to kick a few kernels further away. Better get used to it. Animal Control's making a special trip out today. Guess they heard about your management issues? Elias continued collecting grain, his breathing controlled and steady. He'd seen this tactic before. In training, in combat zones, in places where bullies with power tried to provoke reactions they could punish. His fingers moved methodically through their work, refusing to give Griggs the satisfaction of rushing or showing anger. Nothing to say? Griggs pressed, clearly frustrated by Elias's calm. That's smart. Real smart. Keep your head down. Stay quiet. Maybe we'll keep letting you play farmer for a while longer. Elias stood slowly, his task finished. The gathered grain made a small, neat mound in his cupped hands. His voice, when it came, was soft but clear. I need to pay for this, Deputy. Griggs's face darkened at the continued lack of reaction, but he stepped aside with exaggerated ceremony. Don't let me stop you. Public servant, that's me. Here to help. His hand brushed his holstered gun, casual, deliberate. Elias walked to the counter, paid for his damaged supplies and what he could still carry, and headed for the door. His steps were neither rushed nor hesitant, just steady, like always. Outside, the morning had grown hot and sticky. Tessa's dusty sedan sat in the far corner of the parking lot, half hidden behind a feed delivery truck. She slipped out and hurried to meet him, her reporter's notebook clutched tight. I saw everything, she said quietly, falling into step beside him. I've been tracking their movements since dawn. They're coordinating, Elias. The intimidation, the animal control threats. It's all planned. She pulled out her phone, swiping to a blurry image. It showed the timestamp from her live stream the day before, frozen at the exact moment it died. In the background, barely visible, a county maintenance truck's lights had just flickered on. See the time? She pointed. Signal died exactly when they powered up. That's not coincidence. They've got equipment to jam phones, probably the same stuff they use for drug raids. They're playing a bigger game than just harassment. Elias studied the image without comment, his face revealing nothing, but his hands, still dusted with spilled grain, had finally begun to tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining such rigid control. Elias's truck tires crunched on gravel as he turned into his driveway. His heart sank at the sight before him. A white animal control truck and 2 patrol cars already parked in his yard, doors open like hungry mouths. The morning sun made their official markings gleam with false authority. Sheriff Ketter stood near the barn entrance, hands on his belt, wearing the same practiced smile he'd shown yesterday. Deputy Griggs paced by the goat pen, tapping a steel baton against his leg. 2 animal control handlers in khaki uniforms wrestled with portable livestock gates, creating a makeshift chute toward their truck's loading ramp. Elias parked deliberately, taking his time to shut off the engine and collect his thoughts. The spilled grain from the feed store still dusted his jeans, a reminder of the morning's humiliation. He stepped out, keeping his movements slow and visible. "Mr. Boone," Ketter called out, waving a single sheet of paper. "Emergency livestock seizure. For their safety and the public good." "I need to see that paperwork," Elias said, voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. He'd spent years learning to control that anger, to channel it into precision rather than explosion. Ketter thrust the page forward like it was a shield. The text was sparse, full of vague legal language about reasonable concern and temporary protective custody. No specific violations listed. No judge's signature. Just a county letterhead and Ketter's scrawled name. A door slammed across the road. Rena Dobbins stood on her porch, arm raised. Her security camera's red light blinked steadily, its lens aimed directly at Elias's yard. 11:17 a.m., she called out clearly. 4 vehicles present. No proper warrant shown. Tessa appeared from behind Rena's hedge, clutching what looked like a borrowed flip phone. She started recording, her journalist's instincts overriding any fear of retaliation. The animal control handlers struggled with Elias's goats, trying to force them up the truck ramp. The animals resisted, sensing the handlers' impatience. One of the men grabbed a young doe by her collar, yanking hard. "Careful," Elias warned, taking a step forward. "They're dairy goats, not cattle. You'll hurt." The handler cursed and kicked the doe's hindquarters. The animal's legs buckled, and she collapsed with a terrible bleat that cut through Elias like a blade. The other goats scattered, bleating in panic. Something shifted in Elias's stance, subtle, almost invisible. His hands remained open at his sides, but his weight settled differently, more centered. "Stop," he said, voice pitched low and calm. "You're hurting them. Let me help move them properly." "He's resisting," Griggs shouted, already moving. "Take him down!" 2 deputies rushed forward, eager to please their superior. The first grabbed for Elias's arm, expecting the easy takedown they'd managed yesterday. Instead, his hand met empty air as Elias shifted slightly left, not retreating, just redirecting the deputy's momentum. The second deputy lunged, and Elias caught his wrist in a practiced grip, stepping through the space between them. What happened next looked almost gentle, like a dance move executed perfectly. The deputy's own forward motion carried him over Elias's planted leg. He landed on the grass with a soft thud, expertly guided to avoid head injury. The first deputy stumbled, off balance, and found himself sitting down hard, unsure how he got there. The remaining officers froze. The animal control handlers backed away from the goat pen. The morning air grew thick with tension. Elias hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't raised his voice or made any aggressive moves. But the way he stood now, balanced, ready, completely in control, told a story that made Ketter take 3 quick steps backward. "Don't move!" Ketter's hand dropped to his holster, his face flushed with anger and something else. Fear. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The big, quiet farmer was supposed to break down, give them an excuse. Instead, they'd found something else entirely. "He's trained!" Ketter shouted, pointing at Elias like he'd discovered a dangerous animal. "He's dangerous!" New sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each second. Elias remained perfectly still, hands still open, while his goats huddled behind him in their pen. The injured doe struggled to her feet, limping toward the familiar safety of his presence. Rena's voice rang out again. 11:23 a.m. Excessive force attempted against unarmed landowner. Owner showed legal restraint in self-defense. Tessa's borrowed phone stayed steady, capturing every moment. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard, turning the scene into sharp contrasts. The bright white of the animal control truck against the dark barn wood, the glint of badges against uniform blue, and Elias, solid, unmovable, standing between his animals and those who meant them harm. The approaching sirens grew louder, their pitch rising with urgency. The afternoon sun beat down on Elias's farmyard, now quieter but still tense. He stood in the barn doorway, one hand pressed against the weathered wood to steady himself. The morning's confrontation had left him vibrating with contained energy. Not fear, exactly, but the familiar post-adrenaline shake he hadn't felt since his service days. Across the yard, Sheriff Ketter huddled with his deputies near their patrol cars, phones out, voices low. The animal control truck remained parked at an awkward angle, its empty loading ramp still extended like an accusation. The handlers kept their distance now, stealing uncertain glances at Elias between pretending to review paperwork. "You okay?" Rena called from her position by the fence. She hadn't budged since the attempted seizure, her camera still recording. Elias managed a short nod, focusing on his breathing the way he'd been trained. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow the heart rate. Stay present. A gleaming black SUV with tinted windows turned into the drive, tires crushing gravel with expensive precision. The vehicle looked startlingly clean against the dusty farm equipment and working trucks. It stopped in a calculated spot, close enough to seem friendly, far enough to maintain an escape route. Pure tactical thinking, though Elias doubted the driver knew he was broadcasting such clear intentions. The man who stepped out moved like someone who practiced his walk in mirrors. Early 40s, tailored casual wear that probably cost more than Elias's monthly feed bill. His smile was bright enough to sell toothpaste, but his eyes remained flat and assessing. "Mr. Boone," he called out, approaching with measured steps. "I'm Cal Wren. I heard about this morning's unfortunate situation." He held up a bottle of water like a peace offering. "Thought you might need this. It's been quite a day." Elias didn't move to take it. He'd seen this type before. The friendly face of unfriendly intentions. Cal didn't seem bothered by the rejection, smoothly setting the bottle on a nearby fence post instead. "I represent certain development interests in the county," Cal continued, maintaining his careful distance. "We've been watching the area's potential. I think I might have a solution that works for everyone." He pulled a leather folder from his SUV and approached Elias's workbench, laying it out with deliberate casualness. Simple, clean purchase offer. Fair market value, considering current conditions. He slid the folder forward, manicured fingers spreading documents like playing cards. Elias glanced at the number and felt his jaw tighten. The offer was barely half what the land was worth, even without counting improvements and equipment. "That's robbery," Rena snapped from her position. "I've seen your name on those transfer records, Mr. Wren. Always buying after mysterious violations force people out." Cal's smile didn't waver, but something hardened behind his eyes. "Mrs. Dobbins, isn't it? Always looking out for your neighbors? Admirable." The words dripped with false sweetness. "But this is a private business discussion." Tessa had edged closer, her borrowed phone capturing the scene. Cal didn't acknowledge her directly, but his body shifted slightly to block the folder's contents from her view. "Mr. Boone," Cal said, voice dropping to a concerned murmur, "I understand your background makes certain situations complicated. The county could frame things very unfortunately if this continues. Legal fees alone could bankrupt you before truth matters." He tapped the papers. "This is a lifeline. A clean exit before things get messy." The threat was wrapped in silk, but Elias heard it clearly. His past service, still technically classified, could be twisted into something sinister. They'd paint him as dangerous, unstable, a threat to public safety. The morning's self-defense would become evidence against him. "Not interested," Elias said, keeping his voice level. "Sleep on it," Cal suggested, though his smile had developed a sharp edge. "Things can get very expensive very quickly in this county. Ask anyone who's tried fighting the system. Fines, inspections, permits suddenly requiring review." He straightened his already straight jacket. "The smart play is taking a fair offer while it's available." Tessa's phone clicked rapidly, capturing Cal's license plate as he walked back to his SUV. The vehicle backed out with the same precision it had entered, leaving only dust and tension in its wake. Elias moved to check his animals, needing their solid presence to stay grounded. The injured doe had found her feet, though she still favored one leg. He ran gentle hands over her, checking for deeper damage, letting her familiar goat smell center him. A glint of metal caught his eye. His storage shed, set back from the barn, showed fresh scuff marks around the lock, pale wood exposed where dark paint had been scraped away. Someone had opened it while he'd been distracted by Cal's performance. His stomach tightened as he remembered the letter about his service record, still hidden inside. Rena approached slowly, her camera finally lowered. "I've got it all," she said quietly. "Every word, every threat." "That man's been buying up seized properties through shell companies for months." Elias nodded, still staring at the shed's damaged lock. The afternoon suddenly felt colder, despite the sun's heat. They weren't just trying to push him out. They were building a case to bury him. The evening sun cast long shadows across Rena's front porch as Elias parked his truck. Through her window, warm kitchen light spilled onto weathered boards, a beacon of safety in the growing dark. He checked his surroundings before walking up, habits from his past life rising to the surface like muscle memory. Inside, Rena's kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh cornbread. She'd set up a makeshift command center on her dining table. Laptop, folders, and a small printer she'd dragged out of storage. Tessa sat hunched over her borrowed phone, frustration clear on her face. "They're blocking everything," Tessa said, without looking up. "My main account's locked for suspicious activity. Backup channel got flagged for harassment when I tried posting about the raid." Her fingers flew across the screen, trying another angle. "Even private messages are failing to send." Elias settled into a kitchen chair that creaked under his weight. "How are they doing it so fast?" "Someone's watching my accounts," Tessa said. "And—" She stopped, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "They're spreading stuff about me online. Old stuff." Rena leaned over Tessa's shoulder, squinting at the screen. "What kind of stuff?" "I got caught shoplifting when I was 16, Tessa admitted. "Stupid teenage mistake. Judge sealed the record because I was a minor. But somehow, they found it. They're calling me a criminal, saying I can't be trusted." She set the phone down hard. "They're trying to destroy my credibility before I can even report anything." Elias pulled out his own phone, opening his banking app. "Let me see what I can do about getting us some legal help." He logged in, then frowned. A red banner flashed across the screen. "Account access limited. Under review." "Well, that's not good." "They're moving fast," Rena said, pulling papers from her oldest folder. "Faster than usual." Normally they stretch these things out over weeks. But you? She shook her head. They want you gone yesterday. Elias's phone buzzed with an email. Insurance company, he said after reading it. Due to increased risk factors and pending investigation, your farm policy is terminated effective immediately. They're cutting off every angle. But we've got something they don't know about, Rena said, spreading documents across the table. I've been tracking this pattern since the Williams farm went under last year. Every seizure, every code violation, every anonymous tip that led to a raid. She pointed to highlighted dates, property transfers, shell company names. Cal Wren's fingerprints are all over it, once you know where to look. Tessa leaned forward, reporter's instincts engaged despite her personal troubles. You can prove the connection? Better. Rena pulled out a hand-drawn map marked with colored pins. I can show the pattern. See these red pins? Properties seized in the last 18 months. Blue pins are pending violations. Green shows where Cal's shell companies bought in after foreclosure. She traced a line with her finger. They're building a corridor. Your farm, Elias? It's the missing piece they need. Elias studied the map, recognition clicking. The survey stakes. They're already acting like they own it. We need to document everything tonight, Tessa said. Property lines, existing locks, anything they might try to change. In the morning, we hit the courthouse for official records and file formal complaints with every office that might listen. Use my old camera, Rena said, pulling a digital camera from a drawer. They can't hack or block physical photos like they can phones. I've got fresh batteries and… Headlights swept across her front windows, bright beams moving with deliberate slowness. They all froze, watching the light track across Rena's flowered curtains. The vehicle didn't pass, it lingered, engine idling. Elias moved to the window, staying behind the curtain's edge. A county patrol car sat at the curb, spotlight aimed at Rena's house. The message was clear. We see you. They're watching every move, he said quietly. Let them watch, Rena replied, but her voice wavered slightly. I've got copies of everything in 3 different places. If anything happens to my house, the whole file goes public. The patrol car finally moved on, but the tension remained. They spent the next hour planning their moves, speaking in low voices despite being inside. Rena copied more documents. Tessa tried backdoor methods to post updates. Elias made lists of what needed photographing and measuring. When full dark settled, Elias knew he had to check his farm. He drove home slowly, watching for followers, noting every vehicle he passed. His property stood quiet in the darkness, but something felt wrong. He walked the familiar path to his storage shed, flashlight beam picking out details. The lock on his shed door gleamed too brightly. Brand new, silver against the old wood. Not his lock, not his key. Someone had been there while he was gone, replacing his security with their own. He touched the foreign metal, cold against his fingers, and understood the message. Nothing here is truly yours anymore. The night pressed in around him, full of watching eyes and waiting threats. His past was locked behind that door, and now he couldn't reach it. They were building their trap piece by piece, turning his own space against him. The beam of Elias's flashlight traced across the new lock, catching fresh scratches in the metal where someone had worked quickly. He held Rena's digital camera steady, documenting every mark and scrape around the doorframe. The night air felt heavy with moisture and tension. From her front porch across the road, Rena's silhouette remained visible, a stubborn guardian keeping watch. Tessa's car idled quietly in the shadow of an old oak tree, her borrowed phone ready to record. Neither woman would leave him alone tonight. They all knew what was coming. Elias's hands moved with deliberate care as he photographed the lock from multiple angles. The scratches told a story. Whoever changed it had been rushed, probably watching over their shoulder. He noted how the hasty installation had gouged the wood around the hasp. The lock itself was heavy-duty, expensive, not something grabbed from a hardware store shelf. This was planned. His flashlight beam caught something else. Small metal shavings on the ground beneath the door. Fresh ones. He crouched to examine them but didn't touch. More evidence of their hurried work. The camera clicked softly as he documented each detail. "Got movement at the main road," Tessa called out quietly from her car. Elias straightened up slowly, muscles tight with anticipation. Patrol lights bloomed in the darkness, painting the trees in rotating blue and red. 2 county vehicles rolled through his gate like they owned it. The lead car's spotlight snapped on, harsh white light flooding the area around the shed. Sheriff Wade Ketter stepped out first, adjusting his gun belt with theatrical care. Deputy Griggs emerged from the passenger side, already sneering. Their confidence radiated like heat. They'd been waiting for this moment. "Evening, Mr. Boone," Ketter called out, voice pitched to Carrie. "Got ourselves another tip we need to check out. Weapons this time. Can't ignore that kind of public safety concern. Especially not with your background," Griggs added, hand resting on his holster. Elias kept his voice steady. "You changed my lock. Now, why would we do that?" Ketter's smile was razor-thin. "Maybe you did it yourself, trying to hide something. Need to see inside that shed, Mr. Boone. Officer safety. Not without a warrant." Griggs moved forward, boots crunching on gravel. Could be an emergency situation. Public risk. He reached for the lock. "Don't need a warrant if we've got probable cause." "Don't touch it," Elias said quietly. "You know that's not legal." "Legal?" Griggs laughed, ugly and sharp. "Way I see it, you're interfering with a police investigation. Again." He grabbed the lock, yanking hard. "What are you hiding in there, big man?" More patrol cars appeared at the gate. Ketter had planned this crowd scene carefully. He pulled papers from his jacket, crisp, like they'd been waiting in an envelope. "Actually, we do have authorization right here. Signed this evening by Judge Marshall himself." Elias recognized the name, the same judge who'd rubber-stamped their previous raids. The paper looked pristine, not like something drafted in an emergency. "Everyone stay back," Ketter announced loudly as neighbors began peeking out their windows. "Potential weapon situation here." Tessa's car door opened. She stepped out filming, trying to catch the deputies' faces. "Sheriff, can you explain why you're searching private property at nearly 11 at night?" A deputy moved fast, snatching her phone. "Evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Evidence of what?" Tessa demanded. "Your illegal search?" Ketter raised his voice, playing to his audience of worried neighbors. "Folks, please stay in your homes. We're conducting an emergency public safety inspection based on credible intelligence about dangerous materials." More units arrived, lights flashing. The scene grew carnival bright. Griggs produced bolt cutters and approached the shed door with obvious satisfaction. "Don't," Elias said. "You know what you put in there." "Resisting again?" Griggs stepped closer. "Hands behind your back. Now." Elias could have dropped 3 of them before they touched him. The knowledge sat in his muscles like electricity. But that's what they wanted. An excuse. He kept his hands visible and didn't move. Ketter addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. "This is why we need these inspections, folks. Can't have unstable elements in our community. Can't have people thinking they're above the law." 2 deputies grabbed Elias's arms, wrenching them back hard enough to hurt. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as Griggs tightened them with unnecessary force. They walked him to the patrol car, making sure everyone saw. "Your farm will be a lot safer under county management," Griggs whispered, shoving Elias's head down into the back seat. Through the window, Elias watched Ketter orchestrate his show. Deputies positioned their vehicles to control viewing angles. The bolt cutters snapped through his lock. The shed door creaked open. Rena stood on her porch, still filming. Tessa argued with the deputy holding her phone. Neighbors whispered behind their screens and curtains. The stage was set perfectly. At 11:47 p.m., Ketter leaned down to the patrol car window, close enough that Elias could smell his aftershave. His voice dripped with satisfaction. "By sunrise, nobody will believe you." The dashboard clock blinked 12:01 a.m. as Rena's ancient Volvo idled in the county jail parking lot. Steam rose from 2 untouched gas station coffees. Under the harsh lot lights, Tessa's hands trembled as she spread photos across the dashboard. Elias's careful documentation of the survey stakes, the scratched shed door, the suspicious county vehicles. Rena pulled out a thick manila folder, her neat handwriting covering every tab. 17 similar raids in 14 months, she said, voice tight with controlled anger. Every single one ended in seized property or forced sales. And all that land went to shell companies? Tessa opened her backup laptop, an old model she kept in her car trunk for emergencies. Every acre. Rena's finger traced a property map. Different company names, but the same patterns, the same timing. The same buyers showing up after the sheriff's office clears the way. Tessa plugged in a mobile hotspot, not trusting any local networks tonight. They'll try to shut this down fast once we start uploading. Then we don't give them time. Rena pulled out her phone, already dialing a number she'd written on her palm. Civil Rights Hotline first. Everything on record. The laptop hummed to life. Tessa created an encrypted folder, hands steadier now with purpose. She started with the timeline. Photographs time-stamped from dawn to midnight, showing the progression from mysterious survey stakes to the manufactured crisis at the shed. Each image told part of the story: the illegal raid, the signal jamming, the planted evidence, the escalating intimidation. "This is Rena Dobbins," Rena spoke clearly into her phone, "calling from Riverside County to report ongoing civil rights violations and property theft conspiracy." She gave her address, phone number, and began naming names. Sheriff Wade Ketter, Deputy Lyle Griggs, Developer Cal Wren. Her voice never wavered. Tessa's fingers flew across the keyboard, building redundancies. She set up timed releases to multiple news outlets, civil rights organizations, and state oversight boards. If anyone disabled her account or arrested her, the files would blast out automatically. They can't stop all the channels at once. Red and blue lights swept the parking lot as another patrol car cruised past, slow and deliberate. Both women kept working. They had nothing left to lose by being seen. "Got everything documented about the signal jamming during raids?" Rena asked, hanging up after leaving her detailed message. Screenshots of the connection drops, timestamps of when their county truck powered up that equipment. Tessa pointed to a graph showing the pattern. It's not subtle once you see it laid out. At 1:45 a.m., Rena's phone lit up with a text. She checked it, shoulders straightening. "Denise Sutter is coming." My contact at Legal Aid got through to her. "The civil rights attorney?" Tessa looked up from her screen. "The one who broke open that police corruption case last year?" She was already watching this county. Said she needed one solid case to move on. Rena's eyes were fierce in the dim light. Well, she's got one now. They kept working as they waited. Tessa finished uploading the last batch of photos, including shots of Cal Wren's development plans that exposed how the seized properties created a perfect footprint for his project. Rena organized her property records chronologically, showing how each emergency inspection led to land transfers within weeks. At 2 a.m. sharp, headlights cut through the darkness. A battered blue pickup truck pulled in beside them, its engine ticking as it cooled. Attorney Denise Sutter stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. She wore jeans and a blazer, like she'd dressed in a hurry, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Show me everything," she said, without preamble. "Start with the pattern." For the next hour, they laid out the evidence across the hood of Rena's car. Denise asked precise questions, took rapid notes, and studied each document with practiced attention. Her expression grew harder as the full scope became clear. Finally, she looked up. "This is a conspiracy," she said, voice cutting through the night air. "Now we prove it." She pulled out her phone, sending rapid texts to her legal team. "We file emergency motions now. I want a hearing at first light, before they can clean this up." Her fingers flew across the screen. "We hit them with civil rights violations, evidence tampering, misuse of emergency powers, conspiracy to deprive rights under color of law, the whole framework." Tessa shifted uneasily. "They'll try to bury it. They always do. That's why we go nuclear." Denise's smile was sharp. "Every motion gets filed simultaneously. Every piece of evidence gets logged officially. We force them to explain themselves on record." Inside the jail, Elias sat alone in his cell, listening to the echoes of deputies laughing down the hallway. The concrete bench was cold beneath him. He kept his breathing steady, like he'd learned long ago, controlling what he could, conserving energy for what mattered. At exactly 3:15 a.m., Denise Sutter submitted the last emergency motion through the court's electronic filing system. The timestamp blinked on her screen, proof that the machinery of justice had begun turning, slowly but irreversibly. Outside Elias's cell, the deputies' laughter continued, unaware that their comfortable world of impunity was about to shatter. The fluorescent lights of Courtroom B hummed overhead as Elias Boone stood beside attorney Denise Sutter at exactly 8 a.m. His orange jumpsuit had been replaced with his wrinkled clothes from yesterday, still carrying the smell of hay and dirt from the raid. In the back row, Rena Dobbins gripped her folder of documents, while Tessa Velez balanced a borrowed notepad on her knee. Judge Marion Hewitt studied the emergency motions through reading glasses, her expression growing darker with each page. Sheriff Ketter lounged in his chair at the prosecution table, radiating easy confidence until Denise stepped forward. "Your Honor," Denise began, her voice filling the quiet courtroom, "the probable cause in this case isn't just flawed, it's manufactured." She held up a timeline. "The anonymous tip about weapons arrived precisely 7 minutes after my client's shed lock was replaced without his knowledge or consent. Not before. After." The judge leaned forward. "Explain the lock replacement." "Mr. Boone documented the original lock at 6 p.m. Denise projected photographs onto the courtroom screen. At 9:47 p.m., security footage from a neighbor's camera shows county vehicles at the property. At 10:15 p.m., the lock was different. At 10:22 p.m., the sheriff's office suddenly received an anonymous tip about weapons." Ketter shifted in his chair. The county prosecutor whispered urgently in his ear. "Furthermore," Denise continued, "there is no proper warrant trail. The initial raid was conducted under an emergency authorization that doesn't exist in county code. The livestock seizure notice lacks required signatures. The property inspection paperwork shows impossible timestamps, deputies claiming to be at 2 locations simultaneously." She laid out more photographs, the survey stakes inside Elias's property line, the damaged barn door, the suspicious county truck during Tessa's live stream disruption. "This isn't law enforcement, Your Honor. This is coordinated harassment, designed to force my client off his land." Judge Hewitt removed her glasses. "Sheriff Ketter, would you care to explain these discrepancies?" Ketter stood, adjusting his belt. "Your Honor, we're dealing with a trained combat veteran who's demonstrated aggressive tendencies. These technical complaints about paperwork don't change the threat he poses." "That's not what I asked," Judge Hewitt cut him off. "I asked about the warrant discrepancies and the suspicious timing. Would you like to try again?" The silence stretched. Ketter's smile slipped slightly. "Bond is granted," Judge Hewitt announced. With conditions. Mr. Boone will avoid direct contact with sheriff's deputies except through counsel. He will remain within county limits and continue normal farming operations. She fixed Ketter with a stern look. And the sheriff's office will cease all surveillance and property inspections without proper warrants, real ones, properly filed. Outside the courthouse, television cameras clustered around Ketter on the steps. He played to them expertly, his voice carrying across the plaza. Folks, we're dealing with a highly trained individual here. Combat experience, special operations background. Now he's displaying volatile behavior right here in our community. He's poisoning the jury pool, Denise muttered, guiding Elias toward her car. But let him talk. Every word is actionable. They followed Elias's truck back to the farm, Denise documenting with her dash camera. The property looked wrong even from the gate. Too still, too quiet. The barn door hung crooked on its track, dented inward, like something had struck it repeatedly. A pen latch was twisted and broken. Wait here, Denise said, already filming. Let me document everything before you touch it. Elias moved slowly through his farm, cataloging each violation. The goat pen was empty. Chicken feed was scattered and trampled. A faint smear of red marked one railing. Not much blood, but enough to spike cold fear in his chest. His animals weren't just missing. They'd been handled roughly. A patrol car appeared at the end of the lane, rolling up like it belonged there. Deputy Griggs stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. His boots crunched on gravel as he approached. Heard they let you out, Griggs called. Guess that fancy lawyer helped. But you're still going down, boy. Matter of time. Elias kept his voice steady. You need to leave my property. Or what? You gonna show everyone that combat training? Griggs stepped closer. Come on, big man. Show us what you really are. I'm a farmer, Elias said. Nothing more. Lying sack of... Griggs lunged forward, grabbing Elias's shirt with both hands. What happened next was smooth, controlled, and over in seconds. Elias turned into the grab, redirecting Griggs's momentum. One precise movement stripped the deputy's grip. Another shift of weight put Griggs off balance. Elias pinned him briefly against the fence, not striking, just controlling, then stepped back with open hands. From the road, Tessa's camera captured everything. Griggs's aggression, Elias's restraint, the clean defensive sequence that looked almost gentle in its efficiency. Griggs stumbled upright, face flushed with humiliation. His hand twitched toward his weapon, then stopped as he remembered the cameras. With a final curse, he stormed back to his patrol car. Denise lowered her own phone, where she'd recorded every second. Good, she said quietly. Now we have their aggression on video. The afternoon sun slanted through Elias's kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden table where attorney Denise Sutter spread out fresh legal papers. It was 4 p.m., and the air still held the weight of morning's confrontation with Deputy Griggs. Rena Dobbins arranged her documents with precise hands while Tessa Velas set up a borrowed laptop, her own equipment still in police custody. Write exactly what you saw. Nothing more, Denise instructed, passing out statement forms. Time, place, specific words used. If you're not completely certain about a detail, don't include it. Elias's pen moved slowly across the paper as he documented the raid. His handwriting was careful, methodical, the same way he handled everything. He described the survey stakes appearing overnight, the missing body cams, the way Griggs had planted evidence near the tool bench. Remember, Denise added, these statements are sworn testimony. No emotions, no speculation. Just facts they can't dispute. Rena pulled out her timeline of property transfers, cross-referencing dates with her photos of county vehicles. I've got license plates, timestamps, and recordings from my porch camera showing deputies discussing the raids before they happened. Perfect, Denise nodded. That establishes premeditation. Tessa checked her auto-release system again, making sure the evidence would blast out to multiple sources if anyone interfered with her account. Her hands shook slightly as she typed, but her voice was steady. I've documented every instance of signal jamming during raids. The pattern is clear. They're using county equipment to block witnesses. At 5:45 p.m., Denise's phone buzzed. She read the message and allowed herself a small smile. The State Investigation Unit accepted our packet. They're coordinating with federal civil rights contacts. She looked at each of them in turn. This just became bigger than Ketter's jurisdiction. 15 minutes later, Tessa's laptop chimed an alert. Her main social media account had been locked for suspicious activity. Within seconds, her backup system activated, releasing the first wave of evidence to selected journalists and investigators. They watched as the story began spreading, first regionally, then wider. Photos of the planted evidence, videos of deputy intimidation, documents showing the pattern of land seizures. Ketter can't bury this anymore, Tessa said, tracking the shares and responses. Too many eyes on it now. At 7:30 p.m., gravel crunched under tires outside. Two unmarked sedans pulled into the driveway, their government plates visible in the fading light. The group tensed until Denise checked her phone and nodded. State investigators. Let them work. 4 investigators introduced themselves, their badges reflecting the last sunlight. They moved with precise efficiency, photographing everything: the survey stakes with GPS coordinates, the damaged barn door, the broken pen latch, the blood smear on the railing. They paid special attention to the shed, documenting the replaced lock from every angle before carefully removing it as evidence. Ms. Dobbins, one investigator said, we understand you have security footage. Rena led them to her house, returning with a hard drive containing months of recordings. I never delete anything, she said. Every suspicious vehicle, every late-night visit, every conversation I could pick up. The investigators' faces remained professional, but their interest sharpened as they reviewed the clips. Deputy conversations about clearing out Elias's farm. Ketter's private meetings with Cal Wren. The systematic pattern of harassment designed to appear legal. Mr. Boone, an investigator asked, did you maintain any documentation of the original lock before it was replaced? Yes, ma'am, Elias replied, retrieving his photos and purchase receipts. I document everything about this farm. Maintenance, repairs, visitors, especially since the harassment started. The investigators exchanged glances. One made a phone call, speaking quietly but urgently. By 9 p.m., they were packing up their equipment. We're executing warrants at the sheriff's office tonight, the lead investigator informed them. Do not discuss this with anyone. If deputies attempt contact, record everything and call us immediately. They watched the unmarked cars disappear down the dark road. The kitchen felt different now, less like a refuge and more like command center for something larger than their small town. Try to rest, Denise advised, gathering her papers. Tomorrow will be... Her phone buzzed with a text. She read it twice, her expression shifting from professional reserve to contained triumph. She turned to Elias, who had endured so much with such careful control. They lied under oath, she said simply. The body cam archive has been located. The words hung in the quiet kitchen. The supposedly missing footage that would show everything, the planted evidence, the signal jamming, the coordinated intimidation, had survived Ketter's attempts to bury it. Like Rena's meticulous records and Tessa's auto-release system, the truth had found its way to light. Elias stood at his kitchen window, looking out at his darkened farm. Somewhere in the night, his missing animals waited to come home. But for the first time since the survey stakes appeared, the darkness held no threats. Only evidence. And evidence unlike Ketter's carefully constructed narrative, didn't lie. Morning sun blazed across the courthouse steps as cameras clicked and microphones bobbed above the crowd. At precisely 10 a.m., Elias Boone climbed those steps with measured strides. Attorney Denise Sutter at his right shoulder, Rhina Dobbins and Tessa Vellis flanking them like guards. The message was clear. They moved as one unit now. Impossible to isolate or intimidate. Tessa carried a borrowed camera, documenting everything. Her own equipment remained in evidence, but that hadn't stopped her. Local reporters who'd ignored her weeks ago now shouted questions. She kept walking, focused on recording this moment properly. Inside the high-ceilinged courtroom, state investigators commanded attention with methodically organized evidence. They started with a simple timeline projected on a screen. Every raid, every anonymous tip, every property seizure that led to Cal Wren's shell companies acquiring land. Your Honor, the lead investigator stated, we've recovered what Sheriff Ketter claimed was deleted. She played the first body cam clip. The footage showed deputies removing cameras before entering Elias's property, their casual conversation making it clear this was standard procedure. Another clip captured Griggs placing evidence before discovering it, complete with timestamp and GPS coordinates. Denise leaned forward, her pen moving steadily as she documented reactions. Several deputies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ketter maintained his practiced smile, but his fingers drummed against the table, a tell she'd noticed during depositions. The investigator continued, we've also recovered signal jamming logs. She displayed equipment records showing county-owned devices activated during raids, specifically targeting live stream frequencies. This was not random interference. It was coordinated suppression of documentation. The judge's expression hardened as text messages appeared on screen. Deputies joking about clearing Boone out and discussing how to provoke reactions they could use against him. Ketter's name appeared repeatedly, directing the operation while maintaining deniability. Your Honor, Denise rose. We move for immediate separation of all involved deputies for questioning. Their coordinated statements show clear collaboration to obstruct justice. The judge agreed without hesitation. Bailiffs began moving deputies to separate rooms. The carefully constructed wall of blue solidarity cracked visibly as each officer faced questioning alone. Outside, justice arrived with the swift efficiency that had been denied for months. State police led Sheriff Ketter down the courthouse steps in handcuffs, charging him with civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The same cameras that had recorded his smirking press conferences now captured his attempt to hide his face. Deputy Griggs emerged next, no longer in uniform. The department terminated him on the spot when video evidence contradicted his sworn statement about planting evidence. His face twisted with impotent rage as officers took him into custody, his own handcuffing techniques used against him. Cal Wren tried to slip out a side door but found investigators waiting. They named him in a fraud investigation, detailing how his shell companies acquired properties after manufactured code violations and seizures. His polished corporate demeanor cracked as they listed specific dates and dollar amounts. The county commission held an emergency session, freezing all pending property transfers and halting seizures until a complete audit could be performed. Years of unchecked abuse collapsed in a single morning of receipts and records. Rena stood on the courthouse steps, watching it all with sharp satisfaction. Her meticulous documentation had helped build this moment. When reporters approached, she spoke clearly. We saw wrong being done. We kept records. We didn't back down. By late afternoon, Elias drove home to find neighbors' trucks parked along his fence line. People who'd looked away in the feed store now showed up with tools and lumber, ready to rebuild what harassment had damaged. They worked without fanfare, mending fences, rehanging gates, repairing the barn door that deputies had dented. Someone had rescued his seized animals from a holding facility, returning them safely. His goats crowded the fence, bleating welcome as he checked each one carefully. The small blood smear on the railing was scrubbed clean. Rena arrived with a settlement check, the first of several promised restitutions. She didn't wait for ceremony, just started planning a community legal fund. So the next person they target has resources, she explained, already organizing paperwork. Justice shouldn't depend on whether you can afford to fight back. The sunset painted long shadows across the farm as Elias lifted a new sign into place. Simple white letters on solid wood declared, "Boone Family Farm. Still here." Tessa captured the moment on video, no longer documenting injustice, but recording victory instead. Her camera followed his hands as he leveled the sign, caught the last sunlight gleaming on fresh paint. This wasn't a plea for acceptance or a request for permission to exist. It was a declaration of presence, of roots that went deeper than corruption. Neighbors kept working as darkness approached, stringing temporary lights so they could finish repairs. The farm had become more than one man's property. It was now a symbol of successful resistance against systemic abuse. Every fixed fence and straightened post represented community pushing back against corruption. The air held the scent of fresh-cut lumber and newly turned earth as Elias stood in his yard. His phone buzzed with messages from other farmers sharing similar stories, asking for advice, offering support. The isolation that Keter had weaponized against him had transformed into connection. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.